Solo Spire here with a quick guide on Nocturne in the jungle. Nocturne is a very underestimated jungler within all Elo levels, often being labeled as a second-tier champion for the role. There are actually good reasons to this judgment though. Nocturne is countered by a good number of champions, he is auto-attack reliant, and relatively easy to kill because of that. Personally, Nocturne is my most favorite jungler champion of all time, and I know and have demonstrated that he can certainly live up to his name of the Eternal Nightmare. Should Nocturne get ahead in game, he can shred and melt most opponents he comes into contact with, and can boast a terrifying global presence with his ultimate. To start off, his pros as a jungler are having decent camp clear and being able to sustain fairly well within the new meta jungle, being a very decent counter jungler and counter jungling duelist when the odds are in his favor, having the best ganking ultimate in the game. You can only see darkness and hear his trademark statement, "Darkness," for a split second before he appears in a flash, rapidly hacking away at your health. His ability to chase and stick onto enemies with his entire skill set, as well as being able to escape fairly easily without flash. Being able to completely ignore the front line during a team fight by ulting straight into the squishy enemy carries. Getting ahead in the game makes Nocturne unstoppable in terms of isolated dueling. Sadly though, his cons on the other hand will be, well, being of course auto-attack reliant. He is also reliant on armor to stay alive mid to late game. He is fairly squishy and must be built like a bruiser in order to survive. He also has a very decent amount of counter picks in the jungle, so he's fairly easy to counter in ranked games. Falling behind will also make him worthless in any sort of fight, with the exception of being a meat shield. As you can note, Nocturne can easily be shut down by the right picks and the right items. He definitely isn't a reliable pick for every ranked game. The best time to pick Nocturne into the jungle is when the enemy team lacks a lot of gap closers and evasive maneuvers. The enemy team picks a tanky jungler or any jungler that cannot counter jungle you easily during the game. Amumu, Evelynn, and Nautilus are good examples of that. Your team needs more damage. Nocturne's role is almost comparable to that of a Riven's but less bursty in terms of damage. Your team has good crowd control and can help you lock down the enemy champions fairly easily during a gank. You should never pick Nocturne in the jungle when the enemy team picks Udyr as their jungler. He counters you and will flat out win any duel with you after mid-game. His counter jungling is very hard and annoying to deal with too. The enemy team picks a strongly sustaining jungler. Fiddlesticks, Warwick, and Rammus are good examples of this. Their skill sets allow them to drain your health dry or deny your attacks head on. The enemy team has 3 tanks or more. Nocturne cannot last long in a sustained fight and relies on picks to get kills. The enemy team has great crowd control overall for the late game. This definitely doesn't matter too much early because your targets are isolated, but when it is time to fight as a group, you'll find yourself denied too many kills because of this. Now I'm going to go over runes and masteries really quickly. Pause the video or check out my NAOPGG profile if you want to read it over. I'll be leaving that in the description. Remember to always set your runes and masteries to your playstyle. These sets are just what works out best for me and ranked over plenty of trial and error. My first rune set is a hybrid attack damage and armor penetration page. You'll want to take this page for when you prefer bursting damage during a gank to sustained. It's somewhat harder to stay in the jungle with this page, but your ganks will be a lot stronger and you will have more impact later in the game. I don't really recommend this page for beginners, but whenever you take this page you will want to opt for the warrior enchantment when running the page to maximize the efficiency. My second recommendation is an attack speed page. If you want to stay safe and farm for as fast as possible to make the big plays at level 6, this page will prove valuable. The insane attack speed and a little spot of lifesteal will keep you more than healthy when eating jungle monsters for breakfast. You'll want to definitely opt for the Devourer enchantment when running this page because it correlates best with your runes. Armor penetration is a necessary buy to keep your damage threat relevant late game when everybody gets closer to their full build. I don't recommend using tank rune pages for Nocturne because he can only stay functional in the early game by posing a large damage threat to the foe. There is really only one mastery page that I recommend running for Nocturne since there's not much variety to be used in the jungle. Now I will go over essential Nocturne mechanics. Your skills can go way beyond their basic meaning when playing as Nocturne. They all have defensive and offensive properties depending on how they're used. Umber Blades. Your passive is absolutely vicious when running attack speed on Nocturne. It will deal 120% physical damage to surrounding enemies and heal yourself by 8, 16, 24 HP for each enemy hit. The catch is this will only occur every 10 seconds by default, and its cooldown is reduced by 1 second for each auto attack. The passive can be used to help you sustain further in a fight, making attack speed and lifesteal builds somewhat viable for one-on-one dueling. Duskbringer, Nocturne's Q ability, throws a Shadow Blade dealing physical damage and leaves a trail of dusk for 5 seconds. Enemy champions hit by the ability will leave a trail of their own. Nocturne ignores unit collision while on the trail and gets a movement speed and attack damage buff. This ability is very important to Nocturne, but it can work against him if used improperly. I will explain why. Your Q is necessary for farming in the jungle, but be careful not to throw the trail over any walls surrounding the enemy camp. Your enemies can see the trail, and they can infer and assume you're in the area whenever they see the dusk trail. This makes Nocturne a bit easy to counter jungle when played by amateurs. You should throw your Q, but make sure it doesn't fly anywhere where the enemy can obviously see it. If you hit an enemy, even invisible with your Q, they will leave a trail behind despite being invisible. This can work against them, and you can chase down and kill them when they become targetable again. This also helps when pursuing an enemy in the jungle due to a lack of vision. You can use your Q to not only pursue your foes and deal more damage, but you can escape very easily with it. Throw your Q where you need to run, and take advantage of the movement speed buff. Take advantage of the unit-free collision too. But be careful, your enemy can assume you'll stick to the trail, and throw any form of crowd control on that trail for easy pickings. Shroud of Darkness, Nocturne's W ability, brings up a spell shield for 2 seconds. If an enemy champion pops that shield with an ability of their own, Nocturne laughs it up like a troll, and gains double the passive attack speed bonus granted by W for 5 seconds. This leaves up to a minimum of 40% attack speed to 80%. There's not much to say about this ability since it's very straightforward, but I recommend leveling up at level 2 for the passive help in clearing jungle waves. Unspeakable Horror, Nocturne's E ability, is the bread and butter to Nocturne's ability kit. It deals a little magic damage over its 2-second tether, and inflicts fear on the target if the link isn't broken. Successfully landing this is necessary to killing a foe during a gank. Not really mentioned in the tooltip after patch 421, Nocturne will gain a huge movement speed bonus when the target becomes feared as a result of this ability. Use this to your advantage to lay a smackdown on a running enemy and secure the kill. If an enemy is chasing you, your E will force them to either back off or become helpless for a second, allowing you a more guaranteed escape. The enemy always veers away in the direction opposite of Nocturne though. Keep this in mind. Paranoia, Nocturne's ultimate will make even the bravest laner wet their pants in fear of your sudden assault. This ability is what makes Nocturne the eternal nightmare. You can go anywhere in a team fight you want, you can gank from anywhere unseen, but too many people take this ability for granted and screw it up. I cry too many tears when I see a Nocturne player use this before death or in a really foolish way. Your ultimate's range is pathetic at level 6. Do not use it prematurely. Make sure your opponent is in range and will not run out of vision in a split second before you use it. Vision is absolutely necessary before ulting, otherwise you get spooky dancing skeletons and a good laugh from the enemy team. Use standard ganking judgment when using Paranoia. If you wouldn't gank that lane without Paranoia, just don't do it. If you warn your teammates before ulting, your ultimate has a very high impact. Your victim's only thoughts will be engaging against one enemy champion with that all-in appearance, but then in a split second, there's you. Use Paranoia only on the middle and bottom lanes. Top lane should only be used in an emergency or when the enemy looks very easy to kill. Tanky targets aren't easy for Nocturne to digest, and they don't have much to escape with, so ulting them feels like more of a waste. It's a good idea to also save your Paranoia to finish a foe. Gank as usual, and after they burn every escape, ult to them and finish the job. In team fights, your ultimate is best used for going straight to the enemy's AD carry after a fight initiation to cause massive disruption and confusion. As a side note, players get uneasy when they only see themselves during a team fight and will tend to screw up more as a result. Healing champions also find Paranoia's visual denial tough because they can't target their allies. For attacking patterns, I recommend the following. The first one, the most recommended one, is Duskbringer's lead. You should target your enemy and hit them with your Q. Follow up by throwing your spell shield after landing Duskbringer and knee them as soon as possible. Auto attack away until the enemy burns their flash or dies. You can ult the enemy if they escape with a bit of HP left to secure the kill. This lead saves your ult unless it is actually necessary to burn it. The second one is the Spooky Dancing Skeletons lead. You run up to your enemy, throw up your spell shield followed by E. They should flash, use their escape, or get feared in by you. Afterwards, use your Duskbringer to wail on them. This lead differs from the Duskbringer's lead in that you have more chasing or escape potential later in the fight. You also conserve a lot more of your resources when doing so. This is not the optimal lead though and doesn't get as many kills. Paranoia's lead, the all-in or nothing. Ultimate straight to your foe after you size them up. As soon as you land, WEQ your enemy and mash them up as fast as possible. This lead has the highest kill probability against mid laners as they never expect to be jumped on in a split second. It forces reactive instincts, and the enemy will very likely screw up in countering your gank. This is highly effective in the bottom lane, but requires your attack damage carry and support to engage the enemy support's crowd control in order to guarantee a kill off the enemy's attack damage carry. I don't recommend this lead unless necessary against the enemy's top laner. When it comes to farming in the jungle, use only your Q to farm. You may use your E on the leading jungle mod if you have the blue buff. Oftentimes, Novice Nocturne players burn their mana pool empty by using E on every single mob. You should realize that it doesn't really stop too much of the enemy mob's damage, and it's counterproductive without the buff. The items you build will be dependent on the Nocturne you choose to play. Your jungle item is core to how you play. Choose very wisely. The Stalker's Blade is powerful for pinning an enemy down before you initiate your QWE combo, and it also allows your teammate to get into the action too. The Poacher's Knife is recommended for only counter-jungling pros. Even then, it feels more useful to get a practical smite for ganks and teamfights. It's certainly not for me. The Ranger's Trailblazer is pretty much the easy mode for every jungler in the game. This allows for the most efficient jungle farm and sustain while you're at it. I prefer this item since my playstyle requires me to stay constantly farmed to stay relevant in the game. And then there's the Skirmisher's Saber, which will give you unparalleled dueling potential. This is useful for warding off pesky counter junglers, reducing damage from the strongest enemy during a team fight, or for just dealing the maximum damage during a gank. I only recommend this smite for enemies with no escape or to help defend you from god ears. I've denied many an udyr with this smite. Just be careful if he has a Skirmisher's Saber too. For jungle item enchantments, you have 3 viable options. I recommend choosing the one correlating best with your rune page. The warrior enchantment should be used in sync with the AD penetration pages. It feels like an overpowered brutalizer and gives your ganks more burst potential. This enchantment also guarantees your damage threat potential later in the game. The Devourer enchantment is best used in sync with the attack speed and lifesteal pages. If you want new Pharaoh Flare, you definitely know this item. Devourer is best used with Bladed with Ruin King to maximize mid-game damage per second and sustain. Make sure to pick up a Last Whisperer or Yamu's Ghost Blade to remain a notable damage threat late game. And for last, the Juggernaut enchantment. It's the last enchantment I'd actually go for. This is only if you're very behind and need to rely on your teammates for damage. You should never have to build this enchantment, but don't be afraid to if you're losing. Make sure to inform your teammates that you'll be peeling for them and playing Meat Shield. And for reference, yes, this item has helped and even won out in such a scenario for me. That's pretty much the only reason it's here as an option. For boots, I strongly recommend going with mobility, strictly for the jungle clearing and roaming to set up ganks. It's a bit harder to stick to enemies with these boots, so be sure to get the fur enchantment on the boots when you can. Some runners-up are Ninja Tabby boots, for when you'll be tanking your enemy's attacks more than usual. It helps a little with jungle sustaining as well. Berserker's Greaves boots. This is a nice counterbalance for when you decide to put a lot of AD without attack speed on Nocturne. And if you're feeling crazy, this item will make your DPS Nocturne hack away even faster. And then there's Mercury's Treads. You should never really underestimate these boots despite the cost. Tenacity is a very good thing to have as Nocturne in the case your spell shield doesn't cut it. For your first core item outside of jungling and boots, you should go for the Hydra if you're building for AD. It gives you ridiculous wave clear and it hits your enemy really hard. On the other hand, you should go for Blade of the Ruined King for sustaining and dueling. For damage per second Nocturne, this is his biggest power spike all game. You should make sure to take advantage of the opportunity. I very strongly recommend you start building into a Randuin's or first tanking item at the same time you start your first core offensive item. Your mid-game will suffer greatly without any sort of protection. Go for a Warden's Mail or Negatron Cloak right after your jungle item is completed. Your first core defensive item should be a Randuin's Omen for the maximum versatility a tank item can bring, or a Banshee's Veil or Spirit Visage for denying even more CC and denying an ability power-based team. Although, you should really get both if you can. You'll be in your enemy's face most of the time anyway. It really couldn't hurt. Your last item choice should lean towards a Yomu's, Guardian Angel, Sunfire Cape, Thornmail, or any item that would benefit you greatly. The last item is highly situational, so use your best judgment. That will be it for this video. Thanks for watching. Remember that the difference never starts with your team, it starts with you.